This sounds strange, but electrically speaking, Texas is more of an island than Ireland. For reasons that I think are a bit silly, the Texas grid operates in isolation from the two large electrical grids that cover the bulk of the contiguous United States. Only 800 megawatts of power can flow between Texas and the eastern grid and 400 megawatts with the western grid, which combined is 1.5% of their peak load. By comparison, Ireland has two interconnections crossing the Irish Sea to Britain with a capacity of 500 megawatts each, and a third interconnector going to France is under construction, which will support a trade of an additional 700 megawatts. Ireland can import 25% of the electricity needed at peak, and that will increase to 37% when the Celtic interconnector goes live. On a typical day, Ireland imports about 15% of our electricity. So electrically speaking, Texas is much more of an island than Ireland. Before we move forward, I do want to clarify some sloppy language I'm using. When I say Ireland, I mean the Republic of Ireland, not the island of Ireland. On the island, there's the Republic and Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom. The two Irelands have an integrated energy market, and there's a third interconnector going from Northern Ireland to Scotland. When I say Texas, what I really mean is ERCOT, the Electrical Reliability Council of Texas, which is a bit smaller than the state. Texas, being the Lone Star State, likes to go it alone. They have a grid isolated from the rest of the countries. This allows them to be exempt from most federal regulation on electrical grids because theirs doesn't involve interstate commerce. And because of this, people have died. In February of 2021, a series of winter storms resulted in a near collapse of the electrical grid, resulting in 4.5 million customers losing power. Hundreds of people died as the result of the power outage, and the estimated cost was around $195 billion. Though wind turbines were initially blamed, this graph of power production during the cold snap makes it clear that the problem was primarily caused by a drop in natural gas or methane-powered generators, which were not properly protected from freezing cold weather. This would have been required if Texas was subject to federal regulations. A study covering data from 2000 to 2023 showed that Texas had the most weather-related power outages of any state. But if we look at the data in detail, things seemed okay prior to 2019, and 2021 was by far the worst. Things have been getting better since then, but the number of outages is still high compared to the baseline. It's not obvious why Texas has more power outages than any other state, but their grid being isolated is at least part of the reason. For any other state, if there's a problem, they can import power from nearby states to help support a struggling grid. So how has the situation in Texas changed in the last 4 years? How have they responded to prevent the collapse of their grid going forward? For context, Texas is a petrostate. If it were a country, in 2024 it would be ranked as the third largest producer of crude oil, surpassed only by Russia and Saudi Arabia. Since the Ukrainians have been destroying the Russian oil and gas industry for the last year, Texas is likely to pass their production and rise to second place. This is a deep red state whose leaders don't acknowledge climate change, even as they're pummeled by more devastating storms. Most recently, the flooding in July of 2024 that killed at least 135 people. So whatever action Texas is taking, it has nothing to do with their desire to reduce climate warming emissions. I want to focus on two changes since 2021. First is the dramatic increase in solar power. In 2021, solar was barely a player on the ERCOT grid, but in 2024, solar produced more electricity than nuclear power and will likely surpass coal this year. Wind and natural gas have also increased their output, but not as dramatically as solar. No other source of electricity is capable of growing this quickly. The price of solar panels have been dropping for years, and there doesn't seem to be a bottom. The hardest element to building a solar farm is getting a grid connection. No tall towers that can be seen for miles, or emissions and noise that neighbors complain about. You can even farm or park cars underneath the panels, so finding land isn't difficult. Since Texas has plenty of land and sun, the only thing that is likely to slow the growth is if there's no demand for electricity when it's sunny. That's a real problem. Looking at a random day in November, during the middle of the day, the price of electricity dropped to nearly zero. The fact that electricity prices are lower at noon when demand is high than at midnight when demand is low would have been inconceivable just a few years ago. But now that's routine. Solar is also coming to Ireland, but surprising no one, not as much as in Texas. But as the prices drop, solar even makes sense in cloudy Ireland. In 2023, less than 3% of our renewable energy came from solar photovoltaics, but that is growing. And in the most recent auction for government support, 80% of the contracts went to solar PV. Solar also makes sense in Ireland because when the wind isn't blowing, the sun is often shining, making the system more robust than just adding more wind would. This leads us to the other big change, the increased role of battery energy storage systems on the Texas grid, from practically nothing in 2020 to nearly 11 gigawatt hours in 2024. This allows the grid operators to charge the batteries when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing to meet the demand in the evening after the sun is set or in the morning before it's risen. We see here that the price of battery systems has also been dropping, and new technologies like sodium batteries might lead to even deeper price drops. We see here on a random day in November in Texas, in the early morning, some power is being supplied from the batteries that charged up overnight on wind power. When the sun comes out, the hydro system ramps down a bit. Around 5 p.m. when the sun is setting, batteries and natural gas meet the increasing demand. Given the growing battery and solar capacity, the contribution from natural gas and coal is likely to decrease every year. When the batteries are helping to energize the grid during the evening peak, on average they're supplying 4.8 gigawatts of power, which is 6% of peak load and similar to nuclear power. To go from nothing to meeting several gigawatts of peak demand in just 2 years is incredible. Battery installations increasingly meet the needs that have been met by methane peaker plants. Looking back to the graph of the price of electricity, we see how economics and not climate policy are driving the increase in battery energy storage systems. During the peak working hours, the price of electricity is near zero, sometimes even negative. Buy low at noon and sell high at 6 p.m. Batteries help intermittent sources like wind and solar be profitable because when there isn't much demand on the grid and the prices are low, you can make some money selling energy to charge the batteries. And the owners of the batteries make money by buying low and selling high, by arbitrage. And electricity customers benefit because the batteries keep the price of electricity from rising too high. Ireland is also installing batteries, and we've reached a milestone of 1 gigawatt of power that can be provided from storage, which is about 20% of peak load. Both Texas and Ireland are going big into solar and storage, which is great. The big difference is Ireland's ability to go to our neighbors during times of Dunkelflaute, or extended periods of low renewable energy production, which Texas can't do. This would make deep decarbonization difficult for Texas. I talked about that at length in this video. But Texans don't have any intention of reducing their use of methane. They're just using solar and wind to meet their load growth in the cheapest way possible. But as the price of solar and batteries continues to drop, I suspect that Texas will find their methane-powered plants uneconomical and unnecessary. As the plants get older, more and more will be mothballed. But as they reduce their dependence on methane, they'll become at risk of Dunkelflaute. And without connections to regions where the wind is blowing or the sun is shining, we might see another deadly power outage. So my recommendation to ERCOT is to embrace your neighbors. Connect to the wind farms in the upper Midwest or New Mexico. The storage you're building is helpful, But if it makes sense in Ireland to cross the Irish and Celtic seas to share power with Britain and France, it certainly makes sense for Texas to cross a state line to share power with other Americans. If you've learned something, you can like and subscribe. This really does help my channel get discovered by others, as does leaving a comment. And the best way to support my channel is watching my videos. But you can also support by buying me a pint. Since you made it to the end of the video, you might also enjoy these other videos on the electricity grid. And please share this video with everyone you know who has wondered,
the stars at night are big and bright, deep in the heart of Texas.
what's the thing with Texas?